Hi, this is Jacobus Lier from Georgetown University. Now I'll be presenting, very topical for a RISE virtual conference, a paper entitled Can Virtual Replace In-Person Coaching? Experimental Evidence on Teacher Professional Development in South Africa. So first off, I'm very fortunate to work with an amazing team of researchers. A bunch of them are at the Department of Basic Education in South Africa, and one is at the University of Witwatersrand. Janeli Kotzé will be the discussant for this presentation, and she deserves credit for everything that went well with this program. Right, so starting off with a brief motivation. This question of how to provide effective teacher professional development at scale is potentially one of the largest challenges facing developing countries today. So the reason for this is that there's a lot of evidence that has come out that teachers matter greatly for how much a child learns at school. And possibly because of that, a lot of money is spent every single year on improving the capacity of teachers. On any given year, almost all the teachers in the world receive some form of professional development support. But we do know that in developing countries, teachers still struggle with weak pedagogical knowledge, instructional practices, and access to resources. So the good news is that there's been a growing body of evidence across sub-Saharan Africa of the successful model of relying on pedagogical coaches, but also linked with lesson plans and learning aids. But this relies on coaches. Which is expensive, and studies have found that small tweaks in this type of model, which relies on government to provide the coaching, can dramatically change the effectiveness of these programs. So the search continues to find a low-cost coaching program that can be implemented at scale. Now, in this case, virtual communication might provide lots of opportunities to reduce the cost of coaching. And the reason for this is that you can have one expert coach who can reach far more teachers. That's reducing the cost of transport and also salary costs. And also, if you rely on just one expert coach, you might not struggle to find enough good people to provide this role. But there are reasons why we could think that this might not work as well. Teachers might struggle to use this new technology. But it also might be the case that face-to-face engagement is critical for the coaching process. And this is something I think the whole world has learned about the importance of face-to-face engagement. And so what really came out of the qualitative survey is that the coaches really play three different roles. The one is providing pedagogical support. But here again, the ability to observe teaching in the classroom enables the coach to provide far more targeted feedback that's relevant to the coach. The second one is holding the teachers accountable because they're being observed and need to produce when they're being watched. And the third one is one of a confidant. And here the motivation here is that in order to improve, one needs to acknowledge shortcomings, but it is often very difficult to acknowledge shortcomings, especially if teachers are just so used to being criticized rather than being kind of supported. And so this relationship of trust might be critical in order to enable an environment where teachers are willing to share. And so this is the research question of the study, is can virtual coaching replace in-person coaching? Can it be more cost-effective at improving student learning? So what did we do? We designed a randomized controlled trial in South Africa, focusing on teachers and teaching English as a second language. So in previous studies, we focused on home language, but this study focused explicitly on English as a second language. Both programs that we look at shared a lot of components. It was the same curriculum, the same lesson plans, same training, same implementing organization, same learning aids that the teachers received. A big distinction though, two big distinctions. The first is that the coaching support was, in the one arm, was in person, and they required to visit coaches' schools at least 12 times a month, and they often did it more. We had very motivated coaches. And in the other arm, it was in virtual. They would make phone calls at the beginning of every term and then make follow-up calls every second week if there were some challenges identified. They would also communicate on an ongoing basis through text messages and WhatsApp groups. And they were also encouraged to submit videos of their teaching. And they did this through motivations, through encouraging them to submit competitions. The other key difference is that the lesson plans were paper-based in the one treatment arm, but they were on tablets in the other treatment arm. This tablets also include a lot of other aids like training videos, sound clips, and example exercises. And teachers in the virtual coaching arm also received one more day of training just to kind of teach them about the technology itself. Right, and so this program was implemented over a period of 3 years, tracking the same group of students from the beginning of grade 1 to the end of grade 3. But we targeted different teachers every single year. Grade 1 teachers the first year, grade 2 teachers the second year, etc. We are now showing the results after the end of 3 years of the program. So we did multiple rounds of data collection, including student assessment every year, school principal and teacher surveys, classroom inspections, document review, and we also did classroom observations in a subset of 53 schools at the end of the third year. So what do we find? So first off, we find that the on-site coach is substantially more effective than the virtual coach on different domains of reading proficiency, focusing on oral language proficiency. So this is basically just understanding English even before reading. We find that there is an impact of the virtual coach. That's good, but much smaller than the on-site coach. We are not that excited about this result because after the first year, we found that both these programs were equally effective at improving oral language proficiency. Now, that was the focus in grade 1. In grades 2 and 3, they were meant to transition to decoding skills and actually improving reading proficiency. And unfortunately, when it comes to reading proficiency, there is an impact for the on-site coach, but nothing for the virtual coach. And so another result which we find very interesting is the fact that it really seemed that only the top half of the students benefited from this program. This is now looking at home language, at English literacy for the on-site arm. And it really seems that this suggests that this challenge of an over-ambitious curriculum is also an issue in South Africa, where you need to have a minimum baseline performance before you can even benefit from these improved teaching techniques. Right, in addition, we do find that both teacher knowledge and teaching practices change in both arms, but much stronger and much more in the on-site coaching arm. So here, this is from the classroom observations. We actually see a reduction in certain activities, which is a good thing because they shouldn't just be doing phonics and letter recognition by the end of the third year. And we see, at least for the on-site coaching arm, a commensurate increase in teachers' probability of doing group guided reading, which is a very difficult teaching technique, which enables more individual attention to the students, which is exactly what happened in this case. We found with both of these programs, though, when the enumerators just took a snapshot at 15 and 40 minutes of what was a teacher doing, they were more likely to actually be working individually with students. Note that in the control, not a single teacher was observed to be working individually with students. Great, and now the kind of depressing and surprising result is a reduction in home language literacy in the virtual coaching arm. And so we decided to also assess mathematics and home language literacy skills because we thought there might have been positive spillovers. Pedagogical practices might be applied for home language as well. Decoding skills might also be applied to other languages. So both at a teacher and at a student level, there could be this positive spillovers, but there could be negative spillovers if there's too much of a focus on English as a second language at the expense of home language. And we do find indeed that in the virtual coaching arm, there is this large reduction of 0.19 standard deviations of home language literacy. We do not see this in the mean index in the on-site coaching arm. Right, so we cannot conclusively say why, but one piece of evidence that really comes out strong is the fact that it might have been due to the crowding out of time spent teaching home language. And so there was a minimum requirement of time that teachers should dedicate to teaching home language. And this proportion of teachers nearly doubled in the virtual arm, and which was quite a substantial increase. At the same time, we also find that a much smaller proportion of them are satisfied with their curriculum coverage that year, both of which suggest crowding out of teaching time could have been. But the big question for us is, why is it the case that the on-site coaching arm was more effective than the virtual coaching arm? And so, broadly speaking, there could be 4 different reasons. The one reason is it might be due to the differences in the quality of the implementation. So we can rule that out quite conclusively because the same organization implemented both programs. The implementation was well across the board. We have a lot of data that we can document showing that. Another one is that it could be due to the differences in the frequency of interaction. So the coaches on average in the on-site arm visited teachers 14 times a year, and it was slightly less in the virtual arm. So all the evidence that we've seen shows that there's really not a big relationship between effect size and the number of visits, at least between 10 and 14. So it's very unlikely that this is a driving force behind the differences in the impacts. Third, we can rule out that this is due to barriers in accessing technology because all the teachers in the virtual arm at least once, except for 3%, actually accessed and made use of the tablets. So it has something to do with the in-person visits, which is distinct between these 2 arms. And so one part of these in-person visits, which we find a lot of evidence for, is the increased accountability. And so this is a very interesting slide because it shows the proportion of slides that were read. This is a lesson plan slides that were read and accessed by the teacher in the virtual arm. And you can see here that almost all the teachers at the start of the term look at these slides. But this goes down over time. And then there's this anomaly in week 7. Week 7 is also the same week that students are being assessed. So this does seem to suggest that motivation is a key factor, and these teachers could be spending more time engaging with this content, but they tend not to do that. And survey data also kind of confirm that. We do find that teachers in the on-site coaching intervention are far more likely to say that the coach is checking that they're completing their curriculum, they're held accountable. They're far more likely to think that the coach is supporting them in completing the curriculum, and they're far more likely to be satisfied with how much of the curriculum they've covered. So, to conclude, we do find that virtual coaching, alas, was not as effective as on-site coaching. There's no improvement in English reading skills, but actually a reduction in home language reading skills. So the search must go on to finding affordable, scalable ways to capacitate teachers in developing countries. There are 2 more general policy recommendations that come out of it. The first is that we seem to find here strong complementarities between teacher incentives and technology interventions. And so since technology often has an opt-in nature where people can choose whether to apply it or use it, motivating teachers to actually use it is a key factor. And the second one is that virtual coaching programs need not be ineffective. They could work, but I think there are 2 important components that need to be considered. One is to have some kind of face-to-face interaction, perhaps at the start, to build this relationship. And the other one is to enable or allow some kind of observation of teaching in the classroom. This could entail teachers transferring, recording themselves and sending videos to get feedback, but of course, there are a lot of challenges technologically and from the teacher motivation side to do that. Excellent, great. Thank you very much for your time. And Janeli will now answer all the questions you have and correct all the mistakes I made.